Hello, everybody. My name is Connor Feeney, Individual Giving and Special Events Manager here at the Library Company of Philadelphia. And welcome to Wrap It Up, Wrappers of all shapes, sizes, and forms in the Graphic Arts Collection. We're thrilled that you're joining us this evening and really excited. And this is really, for this really exciting look into the wrappers, but with a W, we have stored in our visual culture collection. As we're getting started, I wanted to give you a quick introduction about today's event and a brief history of who we are and what we do here at the Library Company. And of course, introduce our phenomenal presenter, Erika, Piola. If you have any questions during the course of this presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll collect everyone's questions and bring them to Erika for her to answer. And now onto the Library Company. On July 1st, 1731, the Articles of Agreement were drawn up by printer Benjamin Franklin and the members of his discussion group, the Junto. Initially founded as a subscription library, today we are a special collections repository for the research of American culture and history before the early 20th century. Our rich holdings include over 1 million books, graphics, ephemera, and art and artifacts, and comprise subject strengths such as African American history, women's history, and visual culture. The latter inspired the implementation of the visual culture program with a mission to promote visual literacy through the creative use of historical visual materials. Through our visual culture program, we have hosted exhibitions, research fellowships, publications, acquisitions, digital projects, and public programs like the one tonight, all with the goal to enhance our understanding of visual culture of the nation before 1950. Erika Piola is the Curator of Graphic Arts at the Library Company of Philadelphia. She's also the Director of the library's Visual Culture Program and has served as a Project Director and Curator for a number of Library Company initiatives, including Imperfect History, curating the Graphic Arts Collection at Benjamin Franklin's Public Library, and 18th and 19th Century Ephemera. She is the editor and contributor to Philadelphia on Stone, Commercial Lithography in Philadelphia, 1828 to 1878. Piola has also presented and published work on the antebellum Philadelphia print market, 19th century ephemera, and American visual culture, and its intersections with African American and women's history. Her most recent work about Philadelphia print seller Sarah Hart will be published in Female Printmakers, Publishers, and Print Sellers in the 18th Century, the Imprint of Women in Graphic Media, 1735 to 1830 in 2023, this year. Without further ado, enough for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Erika.
Wow. Thank you so much, Connor. And if everyone will just give me a moment, I will start to share my screen, hopefully somewhat efficiently. All righty. Okay, I think we're good. Great. Well, I just want to welcome and thank everyone for coming this evening to wrap it up. Wrappers of all shapes, sizes, and forms in the Graphic Art Collection. Thank you for joining us. When we think of a wrapper today, what probably often comes to mind are candy wrappers or others often related to food. But wrappers, as with much ephemeral material, often taken for granted in our daily lives, have long and twisty, mundane, interesting, and multifaceted histories. Tonight, I hope to shine a spotlight on humble, yet compelling wrappers of the long 19th century. There we go. To get us started, let me try and answer the question of what constituted a wrapper in the 19th century. A lot, it turns out, and include possibly many articles of material that you may not have realized. In basic terms, a wrapper formed a package in 3 dimensions, was nominally provided by storekeepers before the 18th century, and was typically a commercial device. There were wrappers for reams of paper, wrappers for store merchandise, wrappers that served as packaging of unmanageable products like cards, tobacco, and face powder, or trinkets and toys like paper dolls, as well as for correspondence and what we typically call envelopes today, but were known as wrappers during this era. And for the purposes of my talk this evening, cylindrical paper boxes and containers as well. Graphic Arts Department holds thousands of this genre of material in our collection, the majority envelopes, Civil War envelopes in particular, which will be a part of tonight's discussion. But some of the earliest wrappers in our holdings are ream wrappers. A somewhat meta-graphic material, ream wrappers with visual marks to market the paper were produced and used by European paper makers since at least the Middle Ages. Printed marks, as opposed to written ones on the wrappers, occurred not much later and in the 16th century. The wrapper, a sheet of paper, was placed and tied around a ream, that is 500 sheets of paper, to protect the, particularly at the time, valuable commodity during transport. Not only a means of protection, it was an advertisement for the paper maker. Relatedly, instead of being monetarily compensated, the artists and printers of the graphics could have very well been paid with paper from the paper maker. For the illustration of this circa 1810 wrapper for Philadelphia papermaker John George Langstroth, Philadelphia artist John James Verrillet created a rather telling interior of a paper mill. One can see a worker placing rags, often in short supply for paper making, in a vat of water. Near the press, workers use screens, that is molds, to catch and drain the fibers in order to squeeze out the water and flatten the paper. Allegorical figures of liberty, trade, commerce, and the arts surround the scene and complete the message to be relayed. The images engraved by Philadelphia engraver Francis Kearney evidence the time, care, quality, and thus the expense and economic import of American paper production, and specifically the paper produced by Langstroth. Producers of all kinds of writing, printing, and wrapping paper, the manufactory operated from between about 1801 and 1836, and the evolution from handmade to machine-based paper making. The wrapper was also produced as the domestic American and Philadelphia print market began to take shape, including on American-made paper. The inclusion of the artist names on the wrapper imbued the wrapper and the work of Verrillet and Kearney with aesthetic and commercial cachet, supporting each trade, each reliant on the other to remain a sustainable enterprise. While engraving served as the printing process for this wrapper, relief printing, such as wood engraving or electrotyping, or the flat surface printing process, lithography, could also be used to create the images and typography of these pieces. Such is the case for vignette-size illustrations on smaller format material like envelopes. As advertisements, these graphics can often engage viewers as much as those that are poster size. Beginning in the mid-19th century, manufactured envelopes began to be printed with small-scale commercial imagery. A relatively new form of stationery, envelopes developed during the antebellum period in concert with a more regulated postal system. Postage rates were falling, and delivery was being organized into designated routes. As more mail circulated for longer distances, the practice of folding letters into packets was becoming impractical, and stationers debuted their new wrappers. In back rooms, on slow, rainy days, clerks cut, folded, and glued these new devices. With inventions such as that in 1853 of a commercially successful folding machine by Worcester physician Russell Hawes, it was possible to mass produce envelopes to meet growing consumer demand. As a consequence, forward-thinking businesses, galvanized by continuing advances in graphics printing, employed envelopes as a modern means for direct advertising, what today can be referred to as also an advertising cover. Illustrations, usually devoid of an artist's imprint, adorned the entire face, the back, and most often the return address area, known as the corner card. Intended to be iconic of a business or service, images were most often exterior views, product specimens, or commercial trademarks. With the 1872 envelope shown, a picture of birds, unsurprisingly, is employed to advertise Philadelphia bird breeders Wade and Henry. The 3 puff-chested powders were designed and signed by respected British bird artist and breeder Joseph Williamson Ludlow. Bird breeders and dealers, also known as poultrymen, such as Joseph M. Wade and William A. Henry, relied on true-to-life representations by reputable artists for their livelihood. Partners between about 1871 and 1874, the 2 men participated in a trade governed by standards of perfection that were promoted in publications such as Fancier's Journal and Poultry Exchange. These periodicals highlight the attention to detail and diligence required of fanciers, as well as revealing the intertwined relationships between the bird enthusiasts Wade and Henry, the addressee on their envelope William Simpson, and the illustrator Ludlow. Inscriptions on wrappers, like the name of the addressee on envelopes, allows one to trace the story of the person's life, as well as the full narrative of the envelope itself. Addressee New York pawnbroker William Simpson was also, not surprisingly, a poultryman. As recorded in an 1873 Pet Stock, Pigeon, and Poultry Bulletin, he served as secretary of the New York Poultry Society from offices at 27 Chatham Street, the address listed on the envelope. Although we may never know the content of the inquiry Wade and Henry made to the Poultry Society, we were able to surmise its 1872 date from the other inscriptions on the advertising cover. An 1873 bulletin also reveals the extended relationship between Ludlow and the Philadelphia breeders. Ludlow shipped pigeons to the partners that fall when one carrier and one pouter died during the passage across the Atlantic. Another 1873 periodical establishes that Ludlow created highly praised images for Wade and Henry's trade catalog of that year. Ludlow's work made the volume, quote, not only valuable as a price list of stock and poultry and pigeon appliances and fixtures, but as a notebook of references in regard to the characteristics of the varieties as shown in the illustrations, end quote. The seed trade, often associated with almanacs and catalogs to generate business, also issued advertising envelopes to promote sales. When the Buist firm, established by premier horticulturist Robert Buist in 1828, commissioned the wood engravings by Philadelphia engravers Van Ingen and Snyder for their envelope, they leveraged the space available on the front and back of it to market their Centennial Exhibition award-winning garden seeds. While the front image, that is the corner card, depicts a rosebud, as well as the front and back of a Centennial Exhibition medal, the graphic on the back consumes the rear of the circa 1876 enclosure, with a bustling view of the interior of Buist's 8th floor seed warehouse, serendipitously located by the city's post office. Reminiscent of the Langstroth ream wrapper, the viewer is immersed into a day in the life of the Buist warehouse. Operated by Robert Buist Jr., following his father's retirement in the years previous, the firm's motto, per their later 19th century almanacs, was, quote, onward, always growing the best and most improved seeds regardless of cost, because Buist was rest assured that seeds of value will always find a market. Men and women patrons, including a mother and child, walk through the warehouse, past laborers hauling barrels and sacks. Others are attended by clerks at counters in front of banks of drawers and other cabinetry that line the walls. Baskets and illustrated signs hang from the ceiling, crates and barrels line the room, and large plant displays are visible. One can also see patrons climbing a stairwell in the back left and displays of watering cans and framed hangings on the back wall. How can one, even with the most non-green of thumbs, not want to buy seeds from Buist? Andrew C. Craig, the addressee on this envelope, an importer of wines and liquors through the early 20th century, could not resist to purchase, as Robert Buist Jr. promised, quote, seeds of such quality as will reduce him to always purchase his supplies from us, end quote. Although small and easily taken for granted by most of today's viewers, the pictorial work on 19th century commercial envelope often provides historical information out of proportion to its size. As the envelope so aptly shows, everything about these advertising covers is specific and intentional. Specific and intentional can also describe these motto wafers, also known as letter seals, published in 1848 by P. Thompson. Although not a wrapper, I wanted to spend a moment showing these tiny prints that individuals used as fasteners for envelopes in order for a person to seal them before they had a gummed edge. Sold by stationers, people applied the wafers to also attach papers, mount items in albums, and to post notices on walls and windows. The sheet shown contains over 300 wafers printed with humorous and positive messages and communications, Bible citations, and single bars of music. Referential messages, some specific to holidays or life events, like courtships or weddings, include: hours spent in cementing affection are not lost. For particulars, inquire within. When shall we three meet again? Who the mischief can this be from? And a Merry Christmas. Similarly, the bars of music reference songs such as Old Lang Syne. Illustrated Civil War envelopes did not necessarily require wafers to be sealed. Often the envelopes did not get sent. Although originally intended to circulate through the mail to promote patriotism, these pieces of ephemera rarely made it into the post that had become inundated with correspondence between the home and battlefronts. A collecting fad had taken hold of the Union, and about 4,000 of the over 6,000 patriotic, sentimental, and satiric envelope designs issued during the war flooded the market between 1861 and 1862. By June 1861, the Philadelphia Inquirer touted the envelope mania as an economic boon for engravers, stationers, and printers, who had no cause to complain of a lack of business, while others, such as the merchant class, struggled to conform to the new wartime economy. Civil War era printers and publishers fed this fad by rendering envelopes unusable as anything other than a collector's item when they produced illustrations that covered the entire front of the wrapper. Consequently, the majority of these pieces were conceived to never make it into circulation, but rather into the scrapbooks of collectors of curiosities, like Philadelphian John A. McAllister, who gave his collection of Civil War ephemera to the Library Company of Philadelphia in 1886. In all, McAllister collected over 7,000 of these envelopes that often employed illustrations utilizing volatile themes of gender, race, and sectionalism. Publishers of Civil War envelopes like Harbach and Brother would advertise their stock with show cards like this one that would be displayed in the shop windows of stationers and related trades. Available evidence suggests the fad mainly occurred in the Union. Northern printers predominate among the known envelopes with an imprint. The stoppage of Southern mail lends further credence that a Southern market could not really exist. Relatedly, as the war ensued, envelopes that did circulate in the Confederate States became ones devised by hand and through repurposing. Residents of the Confederacy devised these envelopes in the McAllister collection from a circular promoting the shipping rates of a steamboat line and a tax form that recorded one's personal property, including enslaved persons. In a change of tone, the next wrappers on display remind one of the format of the ream wrappers discussed earlier. However, these were not meant to wrap paper from a manufactory, but retail merchandise. The second wrapper of this kind to enter our collections is the circa 1881 from J. Sear, Dealer in Carpets, Oilcloths, Mattings, 54 South Main Street, Chambersburg, PA. The wrapper was originally one of only two ever offered by the dealer from whom we purchased it. The other one, a circa 1875 wrapper for the Philadelphia Looking Glass and Picture Frame manufacturer, John Langham Jr., also comprises our holdings. To put into context, each is over a foot long when carefully unfolded. The transportable advertisements show their history through the lines, folds, and wrinkles of their paper and their graphics. Unlike the Langham wrapper, which appears to be illustrated with a modified stock image of a crier on a horse, the Sear packaging contains a custom interior view, The image depicts the late 19th century showroom in Chambersburg, PA, of the carpet business established by Joseph Cyr. The angle of the view reflects one taken with photographer's eye. A deduction further proven by this photograph recently acquired through the Visual Culture Program. The printed view shows the expanse of the dealer space and the variety of floor coverings to be purchased. The layout of the area reminds one of today's carpet showrooms, while the gas lamps hanging from the ceiling bring you back to the realities of shopping in the 1880s. The illustration includes other subtle details of the visual and material culture of the era, including storage cabinets and a partially visible sign reading, "Your choice." By the mid-19th century, carpet became a common household item. Cyr joined the booming trade in the 1860s following his operation of a produce car between Chambersburg and Philadelphia, a route over 150 miles. In the decade previous, he worked as a chair maker in his older brother's Chambersburg furniture manufactory. Health concerns returned him to the home furnishings business. In 1868, he opened his carpet store next to his brother's establishment on West Queen Street. A little over a decade later, Cyr relocated his expanding business to the Ware Room on South Main Street depicted. Patterned rugs, runners, and carpets adorn the walls and cover the floors, with most rolled onto numerous shelves surrounding a space. A chair in the foreground invites the packaging's viewer, as it would the on-site patron, to rest and decide on their pattern of choice. The recipient of the Cyr merchandise, whose name and town adorns his wrapping, possibly partook of such a moment. While we will never know the merchandise purchased by Mrs. James Sipes of Mechanicsburg, PA, you can conjecture from Ancestry.com who she was, likely Martha Sipes, the spouse of farmer turned butcher James Sipes. And although we need not continue to wonder who Mrs. James Sipes was, we will still have to continue to leave it to our imagination as to which of Cyr's range of designs was her choice. Since the Cyr wrapper, 4 more merchandise wrappers have made their way into our ephemera collections. All date between circa 1875 and circa 1885, are at least a foot in length, contain relief printing, as well as includes one manufactured by Robert Gare. The printer and paper bag manufacturer invented the folding carton in 1879, and by the early 20th century, operated a 7-building factory plant known as Garesville in Brooklyn, New York. I have not included his wrapper today because in all candor, it is a bit boring. However, the illustration on this one, manufactured by New York paper and paper bag dealers Ward and Bidoff in about 1885, caught my eye immediately. Used to wrap the first-class millinery goods of Mrs. E.C. Cadry of Keenan, Connecticut, this special bouquet, composed of the bust of 6 women who wore hats of the latest and most fashionable styles with short brims and high crowns, is both an advertisement and whimsical fashion plate. Cadry, who established her millinery in 1876, also sold jewelry and sewing machines at one time or another. This circa 1875 wrapper for New England shoe dealer W.T. Colburn again evokes a sense of whimsy. As noticed by my colleague Sarah Weatherwax, an animal with a trunk used in an ostensible advertisement for a merchant who also sold a large stock of trunks appears a logical choice for use as a, so to speak, commercial mascot. Dated from Colburn's listed address in the promotional text, the print proves visually interesting for another reason. Serendipitously discovered soon after its acquisitions was that this elephant design had been used before, during the Civil War, on another type of wrapper. Within the aforementioned McAllister collection are a few envelopes with our elephant friend holding a banner composed with an edge appearing as a smiling face. Although the merchandise wrapper elephant no longer wears boots, the animal still proves a rhetorical force to be reckoned with. For Colburn, who operated his business in Belfast, Maine, for over 50 years between 1846 in 1899. Although all wrappers are packaging, not all packaging are wrappers. As defined in the Encyclopedia of Ephemera, packaging refers not merely to a container, but a commercial container of identifiable content and design. And as I continue this review, I wanted to showcase some of the packaging in our holdings in which we can be sure of the contents contained within and the container that contained them. Packaging provides the fuller story to the item enclosed inside. Without it, it can feel like one is missing the cover to the book. Advertising text, pricing information, and unlike with some of our other wrappers, illustrations of the actual contents can be found on packaging, often printed in color relief or chromolithography. Manufactured in the style of an envelope, the packaging for the paper dolls published by the Chromatic Printing Company of Philadelphia modeled the enclosed figure, like Cuz. The young blonde-haired girl, attired in a red bonnet, a flared at the waist red striped blue jacket, and yellow skirt, sits with her legs crossed and reads a red-covered book. As evident from the advertising on the back of the packaging, Chromatic sold books as well as dolls. The dolls themselves advertised children's books and that children read to learn as well as read for leisure. Seeing and holding in our collections the doll, the costumes, and the package in which they came allows a modern-day viewer the ultimate duplicative interactive experience with its didactic toy comparable to their 19th century counterpart. With this next package, one may not necessarily want a duplicative interactive experience with the material within it. Another envelope-like design, this circa 1906 illustrated sample package contained Philadelphia cosmetics manufacturer Henry Tetlow's Gossamer face powder. A product not explicitly meant for children, the visual employed relays this sentiment. The vivacious damsel depicted exudes the rhetorical air of the age-old marketing ploy of wanting to look like the person shown and wanting to be with a person like the one depicted. Women from the early 20th century could achieve this through the box of absolutely pure and harmless Tetlow powder shown within the alluring portrayal. Although no date is listed on the piece, the figure's attire and the verbiage has stood the test for 30 years, and pure and harmless is indicative of the Gossamer complexion powder's introduction to the market in 1876, as well as the pending passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. The latter began the first regulations to protect consumers from the fraudulent claims of many popular medicine and cosmetics dealers. The U.S. Bureau of Chemistry began to inspect products and refer offenders to prosecutors. The act also required that the active ingredients of drugs be placed on the label's packaging, and that drugs could not fall below purity levels established by the United States Pharmacopoeia or the National Formulary. Based on a zinc oxide formula invented by Tetlow in the trade since 1865, the powder produced in white, flesh, blonde, brunette, and cream was actually safe. Zinc oxide is used today in sunscreen. This was good to know. I say this because when we received the package, it was leaking its powder. After a moment of panic by myself from knowing that not all cosmetics of the early 20th century were safe despite insurances on packaging, I quickly Googled the composition of the powder. To further preserve the package, our conservation staff safely emptied it of its contents. We certainly did not want to empty the contents of the scrapbook of the Theodore Metcalf Company when it entered our collections in 2012. The volume documents the commercial operations of the prominent Boston drug firm, known for its extensive prescription services, that was established in 1837 by apothecary and a founder of the American Pharmaceutical Association, Theodore Metcalf. Metcalf later partnered with Thomas Dolliver, who extended the company's operations to include scented sachet powders, as evidenced by the pages on display. The scrapbook is a cornucopia of the marketing methods and time capsule of the business prowess of the firm that, thankfully for this talk, includes a behind-the-scenes look of how a sample of paper becomes a wrapper. As shown on this page of samples of paper for wrapping boxes of sachet, one gets a sense of the thought process for why certain colors of paper were chosen for certain scents. Dark blue for violet, but of course, brown for patchouli, one can see why, and buff for assorted, a blank slate color to signify non-specificity. Most wonderfully as well, the majority of the pages or items also contain manuscript notes detailing printing specifications, including date of printing, name of printer, method, print run, and cost. Complementing the wrappers used by the popular medicine and pharmaceutical trades were labels. Although a subsidiary wrapper, I could not present this review without discussing this medium and our William H. Helfand Popular Medicine collection. Although popular medicine manufacturers were not the first to employ labels, they were some of the first businesses in the 19th century to use signed, decorative ones as a mark of authenticity. The Helfand collection contains a number of mid-19th century labels that document the trade's savvy in co-opting imagery used in antebellum commercial ephemera, typically associated with respectability, like banknotes, certificates, and bonds. The illustrations elevated daily commercial transactions and aided in the human commonality of fantasy as an integral part of everyday life. Fantasies that included wellness of being as suggested or promised by the label on the bottle. The vignette-sized graphics comprise stock imagery in the thousands, possibly tens of thousands, intracirculated by artists, engravers, and printers in the field, and used interchangeably between genres of printed matter. Obsequious marketing devices, the vignettes are strategically placed to successfully guide and inform the viewer. The prints juxtaposed realistic, historical, and allegorical vignettes that depicted work and genre scenes, portraits, and views that often incorporated images of the female form, children, and animals, and that many times suggested motion. These labels for Comstock and Brother, the firm originally established in circa 1833 by patriarch Ellis Comstock, epitomize this pattern through a montage of advertising text, vignettes, and pictorial details. While classical and mythological figures channeled works of fine art and denoted the nudity portrayed as a sign of a sophisticated viewer, and thus consumer, the folksy, sometimes absurdist scenarios reminiscent of a storybook illustration fostered a personal connection. Within this visual milieu, persons of the 19th century mentally digested miniature images like the ones on Comstock's Dr. Lozette's Juno Cordial or Procreative Elixir. The quote, certain remedy in all cases of impotency, barrenness, painful menstruation, and all diseases arising from debilitation of the system where an impulse or restorative is required, end quote, contained illustrations of allegorical images of female strength and humanity, as well as a wholesome peasant girl and her kid. All symbols of procreation when left to the imagination. Comstock's Carlton's Liniment label contains similar genres of allegorical and realistic imagery. There are the medicine bottles marked New York, the place of origin of the liniment, an allegorical female figure who is driving a horse-drawn chariot. She's guided in the right direction, hint, hint, use this liniment, by a floating cherub figure holding a star. And there is the male Native American figure brandishing a bow, symbols of proprietorship, resilience, and natural remedies. Ideals wanted in a medicine that homeopathically cures the discomfort of the sore bottom or dysfunctional muscles when needed to be a productive member of society. The illustrations reflected the popular medicine dealer's prescribed message of restoring impulses or dysfunctional muscles and courted new patrons with accessible miniature art. The imagery also invited the consumer to decipher that dealer's unique narrative for the allegorical views through a mediated reading of the interplay of the sets of images and the text. In the case of the popular medicine trade, Their success relied on the proactive, some may say gullible consumer, whose visual investment and trust in the label was required. A trust that could be bolstered by statements of copyright and signatures of authenticity, both hallmarks of the Comstock products. A somewhat ironic gesture, given that by the time of these labels, Comstock and Brother were in the middle of what would become a 2-decade period where their ever-changing members of the firm and corollary firms like Judson and Company sued, countersued, and filed injunctions for control of the rights and revenues of Comstock medicines. Like statements of copyright, notices of patent formed the textual elements of labels, wrappers, and packages. This recent acquisition of a package of adhesive suspension hooks contains the notice of a patent obtained in 1877 that was modified into a new patent by Philadelphia inventor Henry R. Hale for his decorative and practical hooks. But before I talk more about Hale and his hooks, I want to point out the cylindrical design of the container. The relative ease of construction of this design made it desirable. The machinery needed to produce packaging with square-cut corners had still to be perfected. The previously mentioned Robert Gare made such perfections and became a primary manufacturer of such packaging, which he helped to progress in design and utility. A happy accident in 1879 served as the means when one of his machines meant to make creases in bags cut them instead. By the late 1890s, the cardboard box became a staple package for mass-produced consumer goods. But as noted, before box packaging, there was the cylinder package. This illustrated paper container houses 6 miniature chromolithographs that served as decorative suspension hooks for hanging pictures, etc. The decorative hooks include depictions of a cat, a pug, 2 young girls, and a stork that are reminiscent of the popular imagery used on trade cards and other collectible ephemera of the period. Likely more so decorative than practical, the hooks were manufactured by Hale as the Hale Manufacturing Company. Hale was not only a Philadelphia inventor, but also a member of the Franklin Institute. He received several patents for industrial, office, and home appliances and equipment, including the stapler. His 1882 patent for a suspension device was likely an improvement on the 1877 patent issued to Walton Twain Smith for improvement in devices for hanging pictures. The wrappers and ephemera in our collections have several stories to tell based on the who, how, and why they were conceived. Now to wrap it up, I'm sorry I had to do it, whether in the shape of an envelope as a means to protect a ream of paper, or the container in which a hook to hang a picture may be found, wrappers of the long 19th century epitomize the most ephemera of ephemera. They are also often a missing link to better understanding how those of the past first came to see and to know the object that lay within the wrapper or wrapped package. While I described this material at the beginning of my talk as humble, I hope this overview has proven that a humble visual work of the past meant as an advertisement can be as interesting and dynamic as visual material hundreds of times its size. They are small but mighty sources to understand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica, for that wonderful presentation. It made me think, especially when you're kind of, the transition into cardboard boxes, made me think about Amazon and putting artwork or advertisements on the tape on the boxes. So just, yeah, something that we take for granted or don't even really think about anymore, like advertisement or artwork on packages. It was really fascinating to see that history charted over the 19th century.
Right. I'm glad you appreciate it. One thing that always, what I find interesting, or what I picked up when you just looking at the images in the PowerPoint, is that a lot of it is not as colorful as one would hope maybe in the beginning. So like with the ream wrappers, or even with the wrappers for the merchandise, and I have to think some of that why it is less colorful is because it is thought that like I said, the most ephemera of ephemera, it's going to be like ripped off of something. It's not going to be saved. It is going to be trashed, which is, ephemera itself. The definition is like, remnants of material that is kind of, meant to go into the trash. But what I appreciate with the, sort of the envelope or the sample package for the powder, I mean, that is something in color. And that was potentially thought that might be something that would be saved or collected or, put in a scrapbook, not necessarily like the scrapbook like Theodore Metcalf, but other scrapbooks, with trade cards and other small advertisements. So that's just, I know you didn't ask that question, but that, sort of what your opening thoughts made me think of that.
Well, and you also, tied right into a question that I did just want to ask quick. How do we, so these, since they are ephemera, I love, I said, meant to be torn off. How do we at the library, just what's the process for preserving these items, especially ones that are, over 100 years old, not really meant to be, hung up on a wall and, protected for posterity? What's sort of the process of preserving these fragile items?
Yeah, some of them are actually a little bit, more sturdy than one would think, like especially the, what we call envelopes today. So at the library company, in terms of preservation for these materials, it includes proper housing. So we house them with acid-free inserts, usually in a Mylar sleeve. So something that's sort of, it's not plastic, but it kind of almost looks plasticky. And so when our readers are working with the material, it's protected with in the sleeve. And also, they're put in boxes, so light is not getting to the materials. We also are fortunate to have a conservation department, which I mentioned. So, with that packet that was filled with powder, since it was leaking, it made sense to dispose of the powder, and that, as I mentioned, also helped, with the preservation of that item. But I must say, we do have a few materials in our collection, sort of other specimens in our popular medicine collection where the substance is still in there, it's not leaking, and so it's still in there, and we seem to be safe, we seem to be okay.
That's good to hear.
There are other things probably in the collection that, if we survived COVID and working with the collection, I think you hopefully can survive some of the stuff in the packets. But yeah.
Cool. Well, do we have any other questions for Erika about wrappers, all sorts of literal shapes and sizes? The elephant with the boots, I think that one really got me. That was a really fun one. And
yeah, no, I was I should have, for whatever reason, I did not remember that elephant image with on our Civil War envelopes. So, but I just so we had acquired that wrapper, and I was looking in our digital catalog at our Civil War envelopes collection, and the elephant popped up. I was like, oh, and to be honest, I mean, there might that elephant motif might even be older than Civil War envelopes, but that's first where I saw it, that trajectory to it being used on the wrapper, and similar to the wrapper showing the man on the horse. I assume potentially that, I don't know, that was necessarily on a Civil War envelope, potentially a similar piece of earlier ephemera. So these images were used over and over again in different ways and for different genres of material, which is kind of what I appreciate, the visual culture of that time period, and going up into the 21st century, the images that still resonate, and just knowing, kind of seeing, being able to trace their history and understanding why they continue to resonate today, or sometimes like that resonance has been lost. It doesn't make any sense.
Any questions? We're sort of rounding out our hour together. Any questions we've got?
A question, Connor.
Great, go ahead. Go ahead, Allison.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Kronstadt. I'm the events and programming coordinator here at the library company. This is sort of a zooming out question a little bit, Erika. I'm wondering how you feel like what the exact parameters are of the relationship between visual culture and advertising, and how that relationship existed during this time period that you're talking about. But I'm also curious if you have feelings about how that has evolved to the present day. I know it's a big question, but this was making me think about that, like the parallels between advertisements on a package to advertisements on the side of a bus, or the little videos that play when you're getting gas now, and it all feels very connected. So I'm wondering.
Yeah. So I think the tack I'm going to take with your very broad question is, the period of time, especially with I'm going to start with the envelopes and moving more so into some of the later 19th century packaging that I showed. Was also influenced by what was happening, the changes in different printing processes, including like steam powered printing, so you could produce thousands of items as opposed to hundreds, let's say. So like when the ream wrappers were being produced, I mean, it was more like in the effect of like hundreds as opposed to thousands. And so what I'm also thinking is thinking about visual bombardment. Some critics of that period and today, that we just have tons of images coming at us, so you feel bombarded. But I think many times, instead of feeling bombarded, they sort of wash over you, so they almost sort of become part of your subconscious or psyche, or maybe for harm, like you just especially for sort of more harmful visuals, racist or misogynistic visuals, that they kind of they don't register in the way that they should. So I think in terms of like for visual culture, what is important, and sort of the mission of the program in fostering visual literacy is also fostering us to closely look at these materials, and take them maybe more seriously than we might initially think to take them, and to like I said, close look and slow look, and really try to understand them, and to process them. And I think that's even true with they're like the what you're saying, was it the images coming to you at the gas station? Sometimes you're not paying attention, and you can think back, and take a moment and think about what you saw. And so I feel like I started losing my little bit of my train of thought there, but hopefully that made sense. It's a little late in the evening for me, sadly. Did that answer your question in some way, Allison?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
We had a comment from Marty in the chat saying it's amazing that there was an envelope folding machine in the 1840s, which for me, I also that was a surprise to me. And I think those, just thinking about the evolution of like printing, packaging, like throughout that the 19th century, I think was really astonishing.
Well, and also just for the envelope folding machine, that even though there was those seals to envelope to close the envelopes, actually that there are already sealable envelopes by the 1840s. You could already start licking them. There was like where the kind of the V, I'm not using the proper term for, sorry, I'm not the envelope expert in construction, just looking at the visuals, the little like where the V part of the envelope, like that part you could lick and seal the envelope. And then I think was it about the centennial, there was like another evolution in the envelope to help even more with being able to seal them. I think was it maybe the fuller edge for you to lick and seal your envelope. But I think this is also case in point that you kind of don't think about. Well, they're becoming probably less a part of our everyday life. Is not as much mail is going back and forth, and everyone paying things electronically, but just sort of think like these everyday objects and artifacts, and how they are a part of our everyday visual world, and they are affecting us in some way. But yeah, no, I was hoping no one was going to ask me how that machine worked, because even though reading about how the machine worked, I'm still not quite sure how this, I'm not an engineer, how this was exactly happening. But even before the Worcester machine, there was, I think it was in 1851 at the the exhibition, the World Exhibition that was in London. There was a machine that was on display at the exhibition, and people were watching envelopes being folded. So today, maybe not the most exciting thing, but back then, watching an envelope folding machine was exciting. Oh, and I should say, with the Worcester machine, since he was a doctor, he was trying to make it as ergonomically not correct, but as beneficial to the individuals operating the machine. So there was a little bit of that going on as well. Again, I could not exactly explain to you, but the operators of the machines were having more of a better ergonomic experience with them than earlier operators.
Marty then asks a question related to rappers. Didn't 19th century books come in wrappers? Would you consider those related?
Yes. I think I was hedging my bets a bit because that those wrappers for the most part are not in the graphic arts department. So I was being a little, giving my props to the department in which I work. But yes, I mean, I would consider those wrappers as well. I mean, there are a lot out there that we could talk about and think about. Thank you for that question.
Well, if there aren't any more questions for Erika, I think we can, as Erika said, wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up
Yeah,
there,
I know,
sirs.
sadly. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending this time with me and with us. I'm glad to see your little screens, and I hope you as I said, you went past found these rappers more than just humble but mighty as I ended my my little talk. Thank you so much.